Hello, everybody. If it's Wednesday, it's Warhammer, and that must mean it's time for another episode of Warhammer Weekly. Joining me, as always, is my one and only and best
Mhm.
and favorite co-host Tyler. And when I say that same thing next week about a different person, I don't know what you're talking about. What's up, Tyler? How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Good to be here. Excited for this.
As am I. I'm excited to learn today. That's what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Also joining us, first time on the show. I'm happy to have him. Somebody who I've respected from afar for quite a while and had various and sundry conversations with, but never had the pleasure to have on the show. Tom, what's up, sir? How you doing?
Hey man, yeah, I'm doing good. You can't say I'm your favorite, Tom, because you're going to get in trouble. But
Oh, don't worry. That's a low bar to cross. That's not hard at all.
no, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. It's very good to have you. We're at an EU friendly time because we are going to be discussing what is in my mind a very EU thing, which is we're going to discuss Teams Play and AoS Worlds. And we are going to, yeah, you're very funny, Gareth. We are going to have a discussion about why this isn't just some weird European play style that the rest of us should also care about. This is what we're gonna get into. Okay, but of course, first, as always, the news. Tyler, what do we got?
Yeah, Rumor Engine. Look, I was getting a Idoneth vibe from this one. I mean, it could be a number of things.
I
Nurgle,
I hate
Tyranids.
rumor engines like this. I really do. What is
Yeah,
this? What
some kind of slug,
is
some kind of
this?
snail.
Or a super zoom in on like a very little part of a thing. I don't know. I don't know. This is nothing. This is something. This is nothing. Tom, would you
Front of
like
a
to
boat?
take a swing anywhere at what the heck this stupid little thing is?
Yeah. Could it be a front of a boat, maybe? Like in the
Could
middle of
be.
Hmm.
it?
Could be the front of a boat. The underside of a boat?
Hmm.
The underside front
Perhaps.
hull? Absolutely. Uh, and um, this is nothing. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Great. You might be right that it's like the underside of the front of a floaty thing as well, because that's all very one color. Like, it's not a lot of highlighting or shading or anything down there, which
Yeah,
would make
exactly.
sense if it was like sort of a hidden portion of it. Who knows? All right, but let's keep going because we got bigger news this week. We got bigger fish to fry. Oh my goodness, there it is, the announcement. The book we all knew was coming, but we're excited to see. And General's Handbook, Pitched Battles 2023 2024, confirmed to be a full year. Let's talk about that just a little piece of news first. Are we all excited that we're back to year long General's Handbooks? Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Tom, where are you living with this one?
Same. I think maybe the last 6 months weren't that great of a representation of a 6 month GHB with all the new books coming as well. But
Hmm.
I think it's much more player friendly to have 12-month GHBs again.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, really, the only downside to a year long season is if you get sort of a stinker of a season, you're stuck in there for 12 months. Now that being said, I am hopeful based on what we've seen so far that this will not be a bad season. I am because they did have some
Magical
other
season.
elements in there, but boy oh boy, did it have it also basically told us we're gonna have a wizard anti-wizard focus, and we got some little tastes of that, of our antediluvian locusts or whatever they're called, whatever the I don't know they had in the thing. I didn't grab that picture. Yeah, I mean overall, Tom, are you excited for Wizard season? Do you think this is gonna be a fun time?
Yeah, it will be a magical season probably. I always wonder where they get like the keyword names from,
Sure.
because
Hmm.
that's like it seems like they have like this big meeting and then they always like what's like probably one of the hardest words to pronounce, but it
Sure.
still sounds mysterious. I think
Hmm.
yeah, but I think it's going to be a great 12-month season. I hope, and well, if it's magic focused, my corn army might be very happy, or they might not be.
Indeed. Tyler, turn the gain down on your mic just a little bit right in front of you. There you go. I'll let you mess with that. You were a little louder than everybody else, the audience said. Uh, now talk.
Am I still louder than
You're
everybody else?
you're a little bit louder, but it's better. Turn it down a little more. Give me another crank there.
How about now?
Ah, there we go. Now you're back. You're
I don't
closer
I
now.
don't know if I've ever been accused of being too loud, but
I know,
okay.
right? That's no. I think you're well. I think you're good now. You
Okay.
sound in line to me. All right. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, more details to come soon on this, and we'll cover it in detail as soon as it happens. But it wasn't the
Yeah.
only announcement in the article, was it? There, Tyler? No, no.
Yeah, the Harbingers, we're getting four of them, each coming with their own little box set, Dawnbringers. So Fire Slayers, Nurgle, Flesh Eater Courts, and Gits. These look
Yes,
pretty cool.
absolutely. And these are like little regiments of renown that can be
Mm.
taken in their Grand Alliance, even if they break the normal alliance restrictions. A more sort of controlled way, I suppose, to do allies, right?
Mm.
And allow people to play around with mixing in some other forces. So that's cool because they have their own distinct sort of rules and points and balance and everything there, right? So yeah, that's cool. I mean, I hate to say it, but that Nurgle dude is just next level, man. That guy, yeah, he's sort of a knockoff homage to Death Dealer,
Yeah.
but holy Moses, that guy's incredible. That figure. Uh, so yeah, good stuff.
What did you think about the flame or the Fire Slayer guy? It was kind of something was off in his face. I felt.
That would have required me to look at the Fire Slayer box for more than like 5 seconds, or even the original Fire Slayer hero, which I did not do because I looked and went, "Oh, Fire Slayers." Skip. My brain just immediately shuffles that information into the "this doesn't matter, you don't care" pile, as
Mm.
opposed to "this is something you need to be interested in." The other three boxes, fantastic. I was like, yes, these look really good. I'm excited. I like Flesh Eaters. Nurgle looks cool. Gits are fun. Fire Slayers, out of here. I understand they're the choice because they're the most mercenary order faction, right? So like they make perfect logical sense to be sort of the Regiment of Renown mercenary force. It's just, there's my opinion.
Mm.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Did we have anything else? I think that was all the news.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. I'll shout out this last piece of news, which is don't forget, last week, Uncle Adam and I's new game, Majestic 13, launched. It's all about defending the Earth from an alien invasion. A secret team of covert operatives that you're leading that's part of one of 13 factions trying to defend us meager Earthlings from aliens. And by the way, all the viral marketing that's been going around recently about UFOs and all of this stuff, I couldn't have timed the release of our game better. So I'm thrilled to see it. So check that out. All the links for the new game are down there. And while you're messing around and clicking on things to expand a description and pick up the new book and the new cards that go with it and everything like that, why don't you also hit that like and subscribe button? You know, all those fun things. Hit buttons. It's real fun. Okay, cool. Let's talk about some pick of the week. Tom, what would you like to share with everybody?
Well, I didn't really have a pick of the week per se, but I just wanted to maybe give a little shout out to the stuff that the Unidentified Wargamer puts out, Sam. Not sure if you've heard him yet, but he's not that big yet, but he interviews like people from the hobby, and talks about how they got into the hobby and stuff that they do and some community members. I've been on there in
Mm.
the past as well, and he also interviewed the Danish captain the week before they won
Oh, cool.
Worlds.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, it's really interesting content. So I always like it when people help the community by making cool content. So I
Mm.
thought I'd give a little shout out back.
Very nice. Dig it. I will link that down below. All right. Tyler, what do you got?
Yeah, just two quick ones, of course. So, the Honest Wargamer Rob, he's got some videos that will be coming online here shortly with some of his stream games. Those will be making their way to YouTube. So, look for those. I don't know if they've got online yet, but they'll be coming. If not, and then Always Strike Last. I saw they put out a podcast with a few folks who attended Worlds. Team Ireland's Mick Wendell, and then two folks from Team USA, Mike Vaginos and Juan Noah Singh. So I just started that conversation, it just came out, but it's great so far. Yeah, just talking about their experience and perspectives having attended the event. So yeah.
Very
That's
nice.
about it.
Fantastic. Love it. I got 2 shout outs as well. So first off, I want to shout out Rob, the Honest Wargamer, and the T Sports Network, and all the coverage of Worlds that they did. It was. I didn't get a chance to watch any of it because of the ridiculous weekend that was happening, but there's obviously a lot of amazing game coverage and stuff like that going there. So if you want to see some Warhammer played at an absolute top-notch level, there you go, right there. You got it on demand for you. And then, of course, also, if you're curious to learn more about Majestic 13, I also linked Uncle Adam's very cool video below of what is it. It's just a nice little 3-4 minute overview of what the game is, so you can check it out. You can also go watch our video from last week where we answered questions and deep dived on the game. Okay. All right, so let's see. Tyler, they said some people are saying you're still a little too loud.
I know.
I'm gonna knock your gain down a little more there. Just keep knocking yourself down a little bit.
It's all the way down. So...
Oh, okay. Well, you should be fine. I mean, like, you don't sound any more loud to me, so I don't have any way to control your sound individually. Push it back from you a little bit.
Yeah.
There you go. We'll do this the old-fashioned way. Move the mic farther away from you.
Absolutely.
Yes, real high-tech solutions. That's what we're doing. We'll get it balanced out. It's funny too because I did a recording beforehand and everybody sounded normal, but what I record and hear is not always the same as what our viewers hear. Obviously, after it goes through all the magic pipes. All right, let's talk about a little hobby time. So, Tom, obviously you've been pretty busy, but have you had a chance? Did you walk away? Juiced, ready? Did you want to do some hobby? Like, have you worked on anything since your extremely busy weekend days, whatever we want to say there?
Yeah, I started a new army. I think about a month ago. I started playing Corn, so I bought an army secondhand, and I thought, you know what, I'll just paint this in the next couple, like 2-3 months. But obviously, with Worlds coming up, like, no hobby was done. But now I have an event in 5 weeks.
Okay.
So I've started to, if I can show it, but started to paint my my corn, but they're green. So before everyone tries to shout at me in chat, so I'm really quickly painting up my corn. Luckily, it's mostly demons, not that much trim, to hopefully be ready for the 2-dayer in a couple weeks.
Nice, love it. So green corn, first of all, I support. Clearly, Pop and Nurgle got involved there somehow, but I've always been a fan of people who do their demonic color schemes in unusual ways. It's not everybody in corn has to be red. Come on now, okay? Like, it's fine. But also, it's glad to hear you got the clock. That's always a good motivating factor when you're on the clock as it's ticking away and counting down. Yes, absolutely. All right, Tyler, what about you, brother? What you been working on?
Yeah, so been doing quite a bit, but not painting related. Working on Vault Wars, working on Warcoda 2.0, actually. So that's in the playtesting stages at the moment. Yeah, work's been busy, so haven't done a whole lot. Still gonna do a Stormcast army at some point. Got to see what this new reality looks like with the GHB.
Sure. Look, I'm going to argue that TOing and or making a new set of battle plans does count as hobby. That's not like normal Tom's thing where he's just like, "Oh, I painted a room." Shut up. That's not anything. We all paint rooms, Tom. Okay. But like, actually, that's in the hobby. You're there. Designing battle plans is absolutely that counts as hobby time. 100%.
I think we've cracked a remake of Relocation Orb.
Oh boy.
So the spiritual successor. Yeah.
Oof.
What everybody's been asking for. It's been
absolutely.
Yeah.
Clearly. No, it's interesting. So anyway, yeah. We'll see what the timeline looks like for it, obviously, with the new GHB coming out. You know, might be a little while, but yeah, it's been fun.
Fantastic. By the way, Mark Kuhn, yes, that's actually exactly the idea of how they've designed it. So 100%. My hobby time was actually finishing up this girl right here. She's all done, and I'm not gonna lie. I got back from my week plus of travel all over the world. I actually just sat at my desk for most of the day. I couldn't bring myself to actually work on anything serious, and I just assembled things. because it was very cathartic to just sit there at the desk and like scrape and glue and stuff like that. Like that was it's a very relaxing sort of thing. But I have finished up this girl, so here she is. This is Morgana Le Fay from Mindworks Miniatures. So she's all done. I'm really happy with how she came out. I think she looks super cool. There you go. Everybody can sort of see that there, and so that was nice. And now I'm actually don't tell anyone, but I may or may not have 500 points of Tau sitting ready to be painted. Okay, like when you have every AOS army, it's time to expand. I don't have everyone, but I have everyone I care to have. So, you know, I was like, let's paint some fun giant robots. Giant robots are cool. I like robots. I like robots.
Yeah, there you go. You're mispronouncing it.
Yes, robots are awesome. So, yeah, space robots. So yeah, I mean, like I getting together a little stuff, played a little game of 40K this weekend as well. So yeah, it was fun. 10th edition, interesting things, and I wanted to get a little bit of experience with it, more than anything because we're going to do the show in the future about what should AOS learn, like what should AOS 4.0 learn from 40K 10th, right? And so I gotta get in there, gotta get in the guts of it, experience it, test it, taste it, touch it, you know, get in there.
I've been talking for a while about getting that tabletop tactics crew on. Maybe we get Lawrence, Katie, some of those folks come on.
Sounds like a fun time.
Because they play AOS too, right, on tabletop tactics. So more from a casual standpoint, but it's great content.
I think that sounds like a great idea. All right, so with that, let's pivot over here to our main topic. Let's talk about AoS Worlds and teams games in general, because this is going to be a little exploration of both. I think I'm a complete newbie here. I'm going to be honest. Like I'm aware of this. I know the shape of it, of what's going on. Like I can see the sort of outer edge of it, but it's this sort of Byzantine system and people and teams and coaches and pairings and matches and I don't understand any of it, because I have long submitted that this could only be a European playstyle. Okay, like I understand there's a Team America and Canada and all of that, but like this feels so much to me like the great leaders of Europe, like pre-World War I, getting together, all the countries coming together and like, you know, making their little alliances and moving the pieces around the board, right? Meanwhile, I'm over here as an American with my 92 out of 100 individualism score, and I'm like, be part of a team? I don't want to be part of a team. I'm me. I play for myself and no one else, right? And so I thought this would be a good chance for us to see this really cool way to play Warhammer and all learn about it and stuff like that. Because there's obviously a lot of people around the world who do play in this, jokes aside, who like this. And it just seems like everybody's having a tremendously fun time, both at Worlds and with teams play and team events in general. So that's the sort of setup. And so we're just going to jump right in. This is going to be me asking questions and Tom talking a lot. I was letting him rest his voice a little bit here, because here's the final standings. Team Denmark bringing it home at 608 points in first place. There you go. You can see if your country's in the top 10. But what is AoS Worlds, Tom? What is this thing?
Yeah. AoS Worlds is a 8-person team format where, basically any country from around the world could participate in. I won't go into much detail here, but every country has its captain, and the captain can select a team of 8 total players and perhaps a coach who's most of the time non-playing. And they can come over to whatever country Worlds will be in, because every year there's a bid to see who is able to host Worlds. Multiple organizations can try to bid, and the winner, the captains can vote on it, and the winner gets to host Worlds, and everyone will travel there to play this 8-man team format. Age of Sigmar, obviously, 2,000 points still, but all 8 players bring a list, and you cannot duplicate war scrolls between those lists. and it just brings a different dynamic compared to singles Warhammer, obviously, because first of all, teams Warhammer most of the time is points first. So the team with the most points will win the event, and not necessarily the team who is undefeated. This year, coincidentally, it was both. They were both undefeated and had the most points, but that doesn't have to be. And the aim for teams is not really to, well, of course it is to win individual games, but the aim for teams is mostly to grab as many points every matchup as you can. So you will approach list building a little differently because there's a pairing process against another team. So you can try to manipulate the pairings in such a way that your, I don't know, counter army will try to find their meta army, or of course the other team is going to try very hard to avoid having that pairing
Sure.
happen. So I think that's like basically kind of short, but not that short version of what Worlds is.
I love it. And by the way, I should state this is only the top 10 teams. There were more than these 10 teams who participated. Because
24.
obviously, yeah, exactly. 24 teams total. So just so everybody knows, it's just this is there were many nations represented here, but I just grabbed the screenshot of the top 10 because
that Nordic model still undefeated, Vince.
What's that? Oh yeah,
that Nordic model. You just
Sure. Absolutely, of course, yes, absolutely. All right. So exactly as you said, it's this big teams event. It just happened recently, obviously, and congratulations to Team Denmark and to everybody else who participated. The question is though, to understand Worlds, I think we've got to understand team events in general. Okay, so you mentioned it. There's a captain. There might be a coach. There's all these players, right? So I got just a series of questions here that I'm going to ask. And I honestly don't know most of the answers to these questions because I've never played a teams game. I've taken the Groucho Marx opinion. I wouldn't be part of any team that would have me. It would only be a testament to the low quality of that team if they tried to recruit or have me on it. So let's just start here. How are the teams selected? So like how does that all go down?
Yeah, so it varies a little bit per country because every community. What happens in general? Let me explain a little bit. What happens in general is that some person decides. Let's say I am from Argentina. There's no team yet from Argentina, so I approach the World's Council and I say, "Hey, I want to rep Argentina. I want to be their captain, and I'm going to select a team." Well, that means you're going to be assigned as the Argentinian captain, but we do expect you to actually approach your community and not just bring your 7 best pals.
Sure.
I mean, you could probably do that maybe the first year because in the end, it might be very tough to find 7 people who haven't even heard about Worlds or never thought about going, and convince them to like take a trip with you if maybe they've never met you before. So the captain can select his own team, and what happens in most countries, they also write a charter. And in that charter will explain what happens, how the team is selected, how a captain is selected, and all these little intricate things. If I look at the Dutch charter, for example, I'm part of the voting commission in the Netherlands. So after Worlds, they can vote for who they want to be captain, and I'm in the commission to oversee the votes, make sure everything works fair. And for us, for example, they look at a combination of who did well in our community in the events, but also they look at who are team players, because you can bring the 8 best players, but they might not make a good team. So the way the teams are selected basically is, I think, captain will look at their community and look at, what armies do I want to bring? What does the meta look like? What players can really play that army well, or those armies well?
Gotcha.
And who can perform in a team format and not just be. You can't have 11 strikers on your football field. You need to have roles. So it will vary per country, but I think the way I just described is, I think, how most of the countries do it. So you can, there's probably some committee or captain you can approach if you want to play for your country, and then he's going to look at your results. Look at the events you've been to. Maybe he will, if you're at an event and he is too, he might, peek to your games, see how you're doing, etc. And then after 6-7 months, about 4 months before World starts, they will probably select the final team and start training and writing lists, etc.
By the way, I do appreciate that in trying to explain this to me, an American, you decided that the perfect analogy would be to go to would be to go
Soccer. Sorry, like
soccer. Yes,
soccer.
exactly. Like yet another thing I know nothing about and care nothing about, but I do
Okay,
get the
let's say
reference. I
five
understand.
centers in basketball.
There we go. Okay. Oh, okay. Now I got it. Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah. So, no, that makes sense. And uh like when you've got your this team and it's selected, and they also change year to year, right? Like every year the captain might, like that person might stay captain, or the captain might
Yeah.
change, pass it along, and then they're going to build a new team year to year, right? So it's not as though like once you're in, you're just in forever and ever and ever or something like that.
No, well, there maybe, of course, I don't know all the captains that well, so there might be situations where a captain just tells the community, "F you guys, I'm just bringing 7 buddies." I don't know,
Sure,
but
sure.
generally, you will see a shift. You can see the same core of players most of the time, but
Got it.
that makes sense because they're probably the core best players in their country. But overall, you will see people shift in and out, captains change, and of course, AoS Worlds, the version we're playing now, is only 3 years old. So we haven't seen that many changes happen, of course, but it does. For example, I believe the USA team switched captains 2 years in a row now. But you will still see the old captain, be involved in the team, maybe even play with it. Except for this time, because Bill Souza, I believe, retired from the USA team this time. So that my statement's not true for the USA, but generally the captain stays involved most of the times.
Gotcha. Yeah, I saw Bill Souza step down, retired, and Sean is stepping up to take his place. There's a
Yeah.
big shoes to fill for sure, but that's very cool. All right, you mentioned this other role, the coach. Okay, so this is not a player.
No.
So what's the coach doing? How do you get a coach? What's the coach doing?
Yeah. So I have a theory where I think the coach for some teams is probably more important than the captain as soon as the tournament starts, because the captain selects the team and makes some pivotal decisions in when the event approaches. But as soon as the game starts, the captain will be focused on his game and should be focused on his game. And so if you have a separate coach, then that coach can walk around the tables. He can look at the game states. He cannot intervene, except when a player asks for a timeout, which they can. He cannot intervene in the game state, but he can relay information about game states of other tables. So let's say you are the captain of your team. I would maybe walk up to you and just say, "Hey, just so you know, we won game 1 and 2, for example." Those things they can relate
Gotcha.
to the team members. So information about results in other games. He can maybe say, "Hey, it's going to be very close, so please don't take, if the 12-8 loss is better than trying for the 20-0 and then losing." So
Gotcha.
those little things they can relay. And of course, they are very involved in the pairing. In many of the cases, the coach will make a big pairing matrix for all the teams. And when they sit down to do a team pairing at the start of the round, they will use the information he and the players gather to devise a pairing strategy and try to execute that strategy. So, and that's where you can win or lose rounds, because if you pair badly, you can have the best players in the world, but if they're all facing their like counter army,
Yeah, their Achilles heel. Yeah.
then you're toast anyway. So I think once the event starts, the coach is very, very important.
Nice. Okay. Good. Good. So sure, it's sort of, I can see it as being advantageous to have somebody who is, how do I say this, like who can step back, right, effectively, and sort of take a broader view of the whole team and what's going on and everything like that. Because when you're in the middle of the game, it's not like you have even if you walk away and go, okay, how did everybody else do? You can't split your brain like that, right? I would imagine. It's helpful to have somebody who's kind of just set aside from this and can start thinking more about the meta level of where the team's at and what needs to be happening and so on. Okay. This isn't my next question in order, but it's my next question that comes out of what you just said, which is, you mentioned pairing. And I think, obviously, this is something that is going to be, for those only familiar with maybe like traditional singles tournaments, right, this is probably going to be one of the more foreign elements. Because obviously you go to a singles event, it's just, your pairing is whatever the software spits out based on some kind of score of your win-loss record, right? Traditional sort of Swiss pairing or something like that, whatever, right? But this is very different. So tell me about first, how do you decide, or like, how does it get decided what teams are meeting against each other? And then once that's been decided, how are the teams determining the matchups they're in for all the players?
Right. So the first, we use Swiss pairings for the teams, but the first round is determined, of course, randomly. And for this year, I was not only, or for people who don't know me, I'm normally the head ref for Worlds, but I was also the winning bid of last year. So this year I was both the tournament organizer and the head ref for Worlds, which meant I could also, for example, select my own streaming partner. And we picked Rob, the T-Sport Network. And I asked him, hey, do you want to do the round one pairing?
Oh, nice.
And you be creative, do whatever you want to do. But just make sure it's random, obviously.
Right.
And then he decided to make it a dice game. So that's how round one ended up being paired. And then from there on, it's just based on points. So let's say 2 teams get maximum points. There's a big chance that they will play each other in the next round, and so forth. And we play 6 rounds in total. So and then once you're paired as a team, going to your second question, once you get paired into another team, you start this little mini game called the pairing, where it's an attacker-defender system, and I'm going to try to explain it in an easy way. But both teams can put down 1 army. The battle plans are known beforehand, so they already know. Okay, they're playing 4 battle plans each round. It's what the captains voted for. Personally, I think it's insane, but that's what I wanted, and it doesn't make my life harder or easier, so fine.
So not everybody's playing the same battle plan each round, right?
No,
like it's
only
it's
2
split up.
tables
Yeah.
are.
Okay.
Yeah, so out of 8 tables, you have 4, so 2, 2, 2, 2 battle plans.
Yep.
And the first 2, you already know the battle plan. It will be battle plan A, let's say.
Sure.
Both teams can put down 1 army already, and they are guaranteed to play on that battle plan. And then both teams also can put down 2 attackers, and they're going to, one of those attackers are going to face the army the other put down. So the other team will grab the 2 attackers, pick which one they want their army to face, and give the other card back.
Okay.
And you play this mini game. It goes back and forth. There are a couple of other things. They can, for example, pick the terrain setup. We have different terrain maps, and they can pick which one they want to play at. One is an alpha, which is a more open terrain map, and one is a beta. It's more closed. So depending on if you maybe have an alpha shooting army, you might want to have an open field.
Yep.
But they play this mini game a couple times, 7 times, 8 times. Well, 7 times technically, because then you only have 1 card left, both teams. So they will automatically face each other. And that's how the pairing is determined. So then you know what army you're going to face, what battle plan, and what terrain layout you're going to be reusing.
Okay. I want to get into, so this is so fascinating as a way, because you're doing this sort of blind man's bluff thing, right? But also which 2 armies you're choosing out of your total stable each time to put up is very relevant, right? Because it's not as though it's all against all. You're picking 2 and you're saying, okay, let's put these 2 forward, and one of these is going to go here, and so on. So like, I imagine that there's a lot of sort of tactics and thought and ways different teams and different people think about this blind man's bluff structure, right?
Yes, that's skill.
Okay. So break some of that down for me. Like, what are some of the fun things you saw, or like advice? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are some of the fun secrets to how people go about this, or whatever?
Yeah. Well, what you see happen mostly, or where the big differences happen, is, let's say you're playing, your opponent has put down Lumineth, the traditional Helon build. They think it's a good defender on a certain battle plan, and your team brought, for example, Beast of Chaos and Khorne, which are both great matchups into Lumineth. But you also have a couple armies who are not that great into Lumineth. You can do 3 things. You can either put 2 great matchups down, so whatever they pick, they're probably going to lose that matchup. But for the opponent, they already know, okay, if I pick Beast of Chaos now, my Lumineth might lose, but my Caradon Overlords player does not have a bad matchup anymore.
Right.
Just for example.
Yep.
What you can also do is put 2 bad matchups down. So you're saying to your players, I'm sorry, you're going to lose, but we'll get a better matchup
Yeah,
further on
sure.
in the pairings.
Yep, yep.
That's strategy. Or you can, put a good and a bad one down and, try to say, okay, you guys can pick. You can pick the good matchup here, but we'll get a better matchup there. So you kind of nullify their pick, and that's the mini game you play. And in my opinion, I would say 50% of your round, of the chance of you winning that round, maybe even more, is in that mini game. Because as I said before, if your pairing goes sideways, you're probably going to lose the round.
Right, because we're talking about people who are this, like, all these players who are showing up here are all
Yeah.
extremely high skill players.
Yes.
Right? These are like really at the sort of tippy top of the sort of skill pinnacle. So these kinds of army matchups weigh way more heavily than they would, anywhere else in the world, effectively, right? If you're just at your local game store, or you go to some random tournament and you're paired into somebody, sort of randomly, in those kinds of situations, the fact that you've got a bad matchup might not mean anything at all. You know what I mean? If you're a decently skilled player and your opponent is a low skill player, that's going to matter way more than the fact that, this army into that army is kind of like 60-40 to start or something, right? Or whatever. Whereas here, because everybody's going to be operating at the highest level of competency, those matchups actually weigh super heavily on what the outcome is, right?
Yes, definitely. And it makes for a different game, because if you know you're put into a matchup that you're probably going to lose, the game, you're not going to play and try to win the game. You're probably going to convene with your coach, and he's going to be like, look, we know you're going to lose, but if you could make it, let's say, a 14-6 loss in the differential system, that will be great. And then you can calculate and think, okay, so my whole game plan is he cannot be 4 points ahead of me.
Right.
So maybe instead of trying to kill some things that would maybe, in a double turn possibly get you to win, you're going to play in the way that whatever happens, he will beat you, but it will be so close that it really didn't matter in the end in the
Right.
team process. So if you add up the 8 games, you might have lost 12-8, but it's only 4 points out of the 160 points you can get.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. It changes the entire sort of like goal you're actually going for. So even the loser match, quote unquote, right, can still absolutely have a victory for the team if you manage to sort of beat expectations, as it were, right? If you sort of beat the market.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and that's how teams approach the pairing. They will pair in a way that, okay, we expect this army to get 14 points against that army, and then that's how the pairing goes. And then in the end, they want to have more than 80 points, because that means they got more than their opponent.
Right.
But then if one of those games doesn't provide the result that they calculated in, that's an issue. And that's why you can't only have centers in your basketball team, because what are they going to try to do? They're going to try to score, and they're maybe going to take a risk that they shouldn't have, which they would have taken in singles, because win or lose, it doesn't matter. When you lose, you won't be able to win the tournament. So let's go for the big play and see if it pays out. If you try that in teams, your coach is not going to be happy.
Sure. That makes sense.
That's a big difference.
That makes sense.
So
Go ahead.
one quick
Tyler.
one.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so Tom, you've given a really clear explanation of the structure of AoS Worlds, and you've mentioned that you think it has, I think you said 50% or more impact on the pairings process, right? On outcomes of a round. So do you know of alternative systems that don't give as much weight to, for example, the pairings process or something like the pairings process? Because I could see that as it's kind of like we're operating, like anyway, this is operating from a clear set of first principles that could be, I could imagine a different format, right? That's giving less weight to the pairings process, and it's giving more weight to the individual performance, but then within a team context. So anyhow, just curious if you know of alternatives or if you guys have looked at alternatives. Yeah.
Yeah, most of the systems you see are defender attacker pairing systems, but if you only have, let's say, 4-person teams, the mini game becomes so much smaller that it changes the dynamic a lot. So
Interesting.
And it's also the high skill cap, like Vince said earlier, which makes a big difference, because also in maybe a normal team event that's not Worlds, you might fluke your pairing, but it might matter less because your team are just comprised of better players. So in that way, it also makes less of an impact. So here it's just everyone is at this level, so the pairing is going to put you here or here, and that might not be for a regular tournament. But I do think pairing is always important, because you can only bring an army once, so you can't bring the best army 4 times. So in the end, you can bring the best army, but if your pairing sucks, you're not going to get the points you wanted. So I think it's always important, but the higher the skill cap, the more other variables are going to matter. And in this in this example, it's the pairing.
Interesting.
Cool. I want to talk later about how this is influencing list building, but that'll be on a later slide, because I'm fascinated by that as well, because there really is such a different structure here that I have to imagine it's changing your thought pattern just the whole way, you know, top to bottom, right? So one of the things, Tyler, you said, because and admittedly I knew so little about this, Tyler had to give me a set of notes to prep up from. I'll be completely honest. And he mentioned that the rounds are 4 hours long. So that's long. I also know the chess clocks are being used, right, at the event.
Yes.
So why 4-hour rounds? Is that including the pairing process in there as well? Is that what's going on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's indeed including the pairing process. And of course, because we're using different types of terrain maps, we want to make sure the players have ample time to wait for the pairing to to have taken place, and then your coach is going to come up and he's going to say, hey, you're playing this army, and this is the battle plan, and this is the terrain map you're going to have to set up. So you and your opponents can set up the terrain map, and then you have 1 hour and 40 minutes per player, so a little over 3 hours to play your actual game.
Gotcha.
And you have to set your clock on that time. So even if let's say the pairing only took 5 minutes because both of the teams like shuffled their cards and just like, I don't know, thought,
sure, just ripped through it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You would still set your clock on 1 hour and 40 minutes because that's just the designated game time. So you just have more space to maybe drink a beer after your game. And it still amazes me because we still have people that time out. Even though the rounds are that long at this level. So yeah, because I think in a lot of countries you have 2.5-hour rounds even.
Sure.
In my community, mostly 3.
Yeah, I think 3 has become the sweet spot in at least for things I enjoy going to. I'll say it's 3 at minimum. The nature of the current game is it's a 3-hour game. Like that's just what it is.
Yes, and it's like you don't want to have new people come to a tournament and then feel like they were rushed into playing 3 or 5 whatever games of Warhammer. So I think 3 hours is the perfect spot. And yeah, we added an hour just because terrain, pairing, etc.
Yep. So and it's Gareth just answered my question in the chat. It's 2 rounds per day, right? Because this happens over a 3-day event. So six games total, basically 2 rounds per day. So 8 hours per day.
Yeah, which is great for me as a TO, because, and also I think for the players, because your mental fatigue really gets you in the 3rd game. I always notice when I'm playing a GT. So playing 2 games per day, it's I think much better to play your best Warhammer.
Yep, makes sense. Okay, cool. This is, and you kind of mentioned this, or you hinted around the edge of this, but now I want to get to a thing I am super fascinated by. Okay, which is the missions that were being used. All right. You mentioned that the captains all voted for this different battle plan system. And look, I think we all probably have a feeling to some degree or another that maybe, just maybe, not all of the missions in the General's Handbook are on equal footing when it comes to tournament readiness. I know this is a very controversial statement. Okay. But did you use all of the battle plans in the GHB? Like, was this 12 out of 12 where they're all going to be used at some point?
Oh, it was even worse.
Oh, okay.
All of them were used twice.
Yeah.
So this is what happens. I joined Worlds last year, March, a couple months before the event. Rules pack was already out, etc. And we played all 12 missions, and everyone complained because last year we had 2 different missions. One also the auto one, auto win on turn 3.
Yeah,
If you win
yeah.
the roll up 3.
Yep.
I don't know, remember the name.
I don't remember the name either, but yes, the one where you could, because you like a thing would end up going away, and then you'd have 3 of them, and you just flip to the win. Yes, it was super sketchy. Yes.
Yeah, I think exactly. So everyone complained and said, "Look, this is way too swingy. We want to have it a different way." So new GHB came out January, which is the GHB we will be going to play because there were 6-month periods or seasons. So I went to the captains. We have a captains Discord where we can do announcements and convey some stuff, make rulings, etc. And I just said, look, guys, last year you didn't really enjoy playing some of the missions, so I will give you some options. It doesn't matter for me as a ref because you're playing them, not me. So I don't want to everything that I don't have to decide, I'll let them decide if it doesn't influence my work. So I just told them, look, we can play 6 battle plans, so you have everyone plays the same battle plan every round.
Sure.
Or we can do a 2-2 split. So you play 2 battle plans per round. So the first 4 tables play battle plan A, and the second 4 tables play battle plan B, and we do that for 6 rounds. Or we'll just do it the same way we did last year. And I thought, well, I gave him the option, but it's probably going to be 1 or 2. And then 16 out of 24 said, no, let's do it the same way we did last year.
Oh, wow.
So I literally made an announcement in the Discord. Okay, but I don't want to hear any captain complain about the battle plans. And they didn't, but the players did. Because, they came up to me and said, whose idea was it?
Right.
They twist and turns on Lurkers Below twice. And I said, you're captain.
I was going to say Lurkers Below. That was the one I was going to mention. Who got sidled with that one? Yeah.
To be honest, in teams, I actually don't hate Lurkers Below because that's a biggie in the pairing. Like, that's a 20-0 pairing right there, if you fluke it. Twist and turns, I hate because there's 0 opportunity to express skill. You could play the best game of Warhammer you will ever play and still lose the game. I don't know if you've heard the story about Tom Guan.
Yep.
Playing against England. He got tabled start of turn 3, but he won the game because the last 3 rounds his opponent had 0 active objectives. So for 3 turns, he was standing on the board. He couldn't score any primary point. Most of the battle tactics he couldn't score because his opponent was dead. So and Jack Armstrong had the same. He had no active objective for the first 3 turns of his game.
Good lord.
So I don't like that mission. Lurkers Below, I think, makes for an interesting pairings. Please don't use it in a singles GT, but for teams, I can understand. I wouldn't have put it in, just to be very clear, but I also don't hate it.
How did you do the differential? Did you like 15-5 for a minor or something? Okay.
Yeah, and 20-0 for the big one.
That's not too bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. So that's the option we gave them. They voted for it. So we went with it, and we're gonna try see what they want to do next year.
Okay. I suppose it'll depend a lot on the battle plans that we're gonna see here. Hopefully not too long from now. That's really gonna be the question.
Yeah. Traditionally speaking, though, I think every GHB had like 2 missions that are sketchy.
Right.
So like I'm going to assume we're gonna have the same again. Let's see what they do. For me as a TO and a ref, it's fantastic because those make great stories, those battle plans. As an outsider, and like I said, it doesn't make my life easier or harder, so I'm fine with with running the missions. And my only problem was how am I going to divide the missions between the rounds?
Sure.
Obviously, if you're playing all missions and you have 6 rounds, you're going to play all missions twice because then you have 4 missions per round because that's what they wanted. So I can either skew 4 of the 6 rounds by putting Lurkers Below and Twist and Turns in separate rounds, which will skew more rounds, or, and that's what I did, I put them in the same round, so then 1 round is going to be completely mental.
Yeah, there's like a nightmare round, yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't skew the other rounds that much. So
Right.
I'm not sure if it was the right decision, but that was really the reasoning behind why I planned them in the same round.
Interesting.
Nice. And Gareth mentioned in the chat, he said what's fascinating is that some missions are bad because they're just random. So twist and turns is the example he gave. Your story is saying that. And it's a tactical decision to put your losing matchup on that mission. So that like potentially that losing matchup either goes exactly how you thought it would, right? Like, well, we thought we were going to lose and basically get not much out of this, and in fact that's how it worked. But there's also the potential that oops, the complete randomness of the dice just worked in our favor, and now we have a huge overperformer on that spot. So that is really interesting how you can like turn what would normally be a bad scenario into a potential upside, right?
Yeah,
it's like you're
the
short
reason I
selling the mission.
Yeah, I did put twists and turns at the final two tables, just so that you have basically almost zero control over the cards you have left in hand. So it's not that easy to do that, but I did give it a little bit of thought.
Nice. Okay, all right. So then, the final question I had written on this slide before we go next, is just like, what do you think is the key to success for a team? Like, obviously, this is an extremely competitive event, right? So in your mind, what's separating, a winning team from not? Like what's helping, what's contributing? There's no single factor, of course. This is going to be like a broad-based thing, right? We've got a lot of contributory factors. But what do you think are the sort of contributory elements that allow a team to sort of rise or to put them in the position to capitalize best, perhaps, is another way to think about it.
Yeah, right. Well, I think the top, let's say, 8 to 10 teams are all good teams. So the way they can set themselves apart is in preparation, for example. Denmark, for example, this year prepared extremely well. If you want to know what they did, actually, the Danish captain Rune on Twitter posted a short blog where he explained how they approached the matchups, list writing, and stuff like that. And the big mistake people make is writing a good singles list and then bringing it to teams. Where because you're going to get paired into hopefully good or probably terrible matchups, it can sometimes be more beneficial to write a skewed list that will absolutely demolish a good matchup. Not just win it, like absolutely demolish, because your captain and coach are going to try to put you in that matchup.
Right.
So doing the preparation well and also making good estimates about how good your army A, B, C, and D are playing into their army A, B, C, and D. That's the biggest difference, and that's why I said the 50% come from the pairings, because it just shows what team prepared better, basically.
Interesting.
It blew my mind seeing on Twitter, some of these sheets with the pairings and the level of detail that some of these teams went into. It's really cool. It's impressive. Very nerdy, like just a whole new level of nerd. And
it pays off.
It truly pays off. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
By the way, if people are interested, AoS Worlds itself has a Twitter account. I'll link it down below in the description, so people can go check that out. And if you go there, the AoS Worlds Twitter account has links out and retweets all of the other, because every country's team also has generally, I don't know if all 24 do, but I'm pretty sure most of them do, have their own Twitter as well, and they share out stuff from their individual teams and prep and experiences and stuff like that. And it's really good. So that central AoS Worlds Twitter account's a good place to check out if you want to see like a lot of stuff out of the event and just cool fun photos and things like that. And then go find your own country's team Twitter from there, right, and see how they did and what their experiences were.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. All right, let's talk about lists. I purposely separated this out because to me this is 100% its own thing, and you already set us up for it pretty well, okay? Because you said that like the difference between how you write a list for a singles event and how you write a list for this kind of a teams event could be often extremely different, right? And that's what I'm saying. Like I think the nature of sort of the pairing process and how you're going to play and what you're trying to actually accomplish is often different. I don't know if it's fully like a line that doesn't touch, right? But it's definitely off at an angle here, right? And so, okay, let's talk about list building. So the first thing I want to get down is you mentioned this a little bit, but the list building restrictions. So what kind of list building restrictions are in effect here?
Exactly. So a team has 8 army lists, obviously, and every army list can no war scroll can be duplicated among army lists. So let's say I'm playing Horn. I can have multiple bloodletter units in my list, but a Nurgle player cannot ally in bloodletters because
Okay.
one, you don't want to do that, and two, I already have them in my list, so
Right.
you cannot duplicate. You can summon in some units later. So if I'm allying in a unit of Gors, and you're playing Beast of Chaos, and you have the trumpet that can summon a unit of Gors, the artifact, you are still allowed to summon that unit. But in your initial starting list, you cannot duplicate anything. No war scrolls, no endless spells, no general universal enhancements,
Wow.
apart
Okay.
from triumphs, because there are not enough triumphs to go
Sure.
around, of
To go
course.
around. Yeah.
And for this year, we also allowed them to duplicate up to 3 times their what's it called? Tunnel Master.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Aspect of it, yeah.
Their Galatian champion bonus. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
exactly. So they were allowed to have 3 of those in their army list.
Gotcha.
So because
So you could
also
have three
there were
people
not
with
8.
stubbornness or Rhinox or whatever, that
Yes,
kind of thing. Yeah.
yes, exactly.
Mm.
And then triumphs, and then enhancements are restricted, like I said. And battalions you can just use. We didn't restrict the battalions because I do think it could be an interesting thing limiting battle regiment, because that's
Yeah.
gonna
Sure.
spice
Sure.
things up. But I don't
Mm.
think that I don't think we should do that. But it would make
Mm.
for a very interesting.
It would, but you're right. Right now, the challenge is you've basically got like 2.5 functional battalions outside of army book specific battalions, and realistically, those army book specific battalions are so all over the shop, with like some being highly playable and some being just like
Yeah.
complete nonsense you would never actually put together as as a feasible list in any kind of game. Like they just get
No.
written like they're just lunatic battalions.
Yeah.
Okay, the thing there that's fascinating to me is the whole and that no duplication of war scrolls is really interesting because I think of let's say you've got some amazing banger ally, and the easy go to here, although he's not actually good, but there's been points in time where he's been good. Let's you think of somebody like Celestin Prime, right? The all star
Knew you were
ally,
gonna say him.
of course, never in
The
his
moment I
own
told
army, but
not
shows
not
up.
not actually. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
but there was a period of time where he was showing up in 5 other
Yeah.
different order armies, right? Not the case
Yeah.
now. It limits anybody's ability to do that, right? You can't have oh, here's our 3 order armies. We're not playing any Stormcast, but all 3 have taken prime time, right?
Right.
That goes off the table. Okay,
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah.
got it. I got it. Okay.
What's interesting about that is if you look at that from a list perspective, let's say you're bringing Zinj and Lumineth, only one can bring a spell portal,
Yeah,
which
Yeah.
can
sure.
influence your list. Or
Mm.
The new Seraphon. We weren't playing new Seraphon, but for example, new Seraphon. Those
Mm.
players are going to really, really put pressure on their captain to say, "Hey, I should be the one with the spell portal."
Right.
So that also makes for interesting picks.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a good point because just the nature of some of those endless spells, especially those game plan defining endless spells where it's okay, my a lot of when we talk in singles, you'll often just talk about the list and you'll be like, well, obviously you're gonna have spell portal in your list and so blah, right? And just it's just assumed as part of how the army functions. Well, of course they just have spell portal because 95% of the competitive list will just have X endless spell in it, right? And that's very much not the case you necessarily can rely on here. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Nope.
Cool. So when it comes to the list building, you mentioned this leaning towards potentially more towards the skew, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to
Absolutely.
either win big or you're just gonna get sort of thrown to the sharks, as it were, or whatever, where you're okay, you've got the losing match, we don't stand a chance here. We're just gonna use this skew into this one that we know we'll lose, and it's fine if you pull something out, great, right? So where do you think where the rubber meets the road in list building? How do you think that actually manifests? What are the different choices? And you can use a specific army if you want as an
Yeah.
example. Oh, in singles, this would be perfectly fine, but that's just death in this kind of a team event, right? Just let's make that a little more real for people.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I sometimes for example, the Dutch team, I helped the Dutch team a little bit with some. I love writing lists. Like, I'm not a great painter. I'm not a big hobbyist. I'm really someone who's really interested in the gaming aspect of Warhammer.
Mm.
I love writing lists. I write a couple army lists every day, probably for multiple books. So the Dutch team captain Jeffrey asked, "Hey, when we're writing our list, could you maybe help and see if you can give some insight?" And one of the things that I mentioned, for example, is for Gloomspite Gits. Of course, a very popular army, an army that's doing very well. But one of their big weaknesses was the Lumineth build, the Helon build.
Mm.
So you already know as a team that your opposing team is going to try to put the Lumineth army, their Lumineth army, into your Gits army, because that's probably a winning matchup for them. So you can do two things. You can either say, okay, screw it. If that happens, the Gits player is just going to give up and we'll try to get a better matchup elsewhere. Or, and I spoke about with some of the army lists, I spoke with the players about this. You could also maybe try to see if you can write your army list in such a way that the big advantage that the Lumineth player thinks he has or she has is not that big, which means their possible 18-2 win turns into a 15-5, which means they didn't get the points they accounted for.
Right.
So I did that, for example, by not making 2 units of 36 Quick Hurt against the Lumineth matchup, which they will try to turn off with the Cathalar spell and
Right.
the
Overwhelming
other spell.
heat.
Yeah.
Overwhelming heat. Yeah.
But we made 3 blocks of 24.
Yeah.
And now you were only able to turn off 2 units. The third
Mm.
unit can run up, and then I think they
That's cool.
even meant I think the Dutch player actually won the Lumineth matchup or
Mm.
lost very, very closely, even though that was supposed to be a big win for the Lumineth player.
Nice.
So those little things can manifest in a big way. And that's why, for example, Runa didn't play Helon Lumineth build. He played a very different build.
Yeah.
Because it would help him in the matchups that people were trying to put him into.
Sure.
So it's
Yeah.
reverse psychology to say, okay,
Mhm.
well, we are going to let you pair into the good matchup, but it's just not as good as you think.
Mm.
Okay. Cool. Very nice. Tyler, what have you? I know you followed along with some of this, and you're also a list hound, right? Like you're a big fan and always thinking about army construction and stuff like that. Was there anything you saw or you thought that comes to your mind in like how you think about list building, vis-a-vis the team's format and like what does it make you think about when you think about the changes and the differences here?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was feeling, I don't know to what degree this is true, was, I mean, I feel like I was looking at a set of lists that, as one would expect, would have a skew in different directions. So, like list archetypes. So, for example, the KO 30 plus Thunders is one clear skewed archetype right now, right? I felt like I was seeing that all over the place, Tom, in list at Worlds. The 10 Chaos Knights, 2x6 Vanguards, couple of Sork Lords, right? Or maybe some Chosen, but that Slaves of Darkness, kind of Phil Marshall, type of archetype, right? I felt like I was seeing. So definitely that was very pronounced. Like it's kind of what I would expect. I mean, one thing I was thinking as you were just talking a minute ago, Tom, was while it may not, I don't know if it's, well, it doesn't, certainly most people don't appear to think it's the stronger build in Gits, but I do feel like the Trolls build is quite strong. Like 18 Raka Traga, some number of Fellwaters, right, Dankle Trogboss, etc. I don't know if I saw a single troll-oriented list at Worlds. I was a little surprised by that. I don't know if you had any reflections on that.
No, indeed. I just think that in a teams format, this quick hurt list can overwhelm so many
Yeah,
armies
yeah,
that that's why they picked that one. You just mentioned slaves as an example.
yeah,
When the new book came out, I first started writing lists for Ravagers. So Archeon, 70, whatever, Splinterfang,
right,
etc.,
Sure.
right.
etc. Which might not be a great pick in a singles tournament, but in the end, the Dutch slaves player started playing the list, and he really liked it for teams because, for example, it was great into Lumineth, and
Mm,
it had some other good matchups. And that's an example list I find of a list that you might not see at a singles tournament that much, but you will see at a teams tournament. And I
mm,
think the same goes for the 6 or 9 Stormfiend lists, which you might see sometimes at singles,
mm.
but it's not that popular. But we saw it a couple times in teams, and
Yeah,
and the same goes for some of the Crew Boys list. They didn't end up doing that well, but you could see that they were picked to maybe counter KO or counter some of the things that you could see there was a plan. I'm not sure if it was the right plan, but
Right.
there were types of lists that you wouldn't expect to do well at singles.
Yeah, the number of Beasts of Chaos lists that were there, I thought was reflective of the team format
Yeah,
as
for
opposed
sure.
to singles, because it's
Yeah,
a
definitely.
high skill book, but yeah, they can pair in
Yes.
well.
Yeah, and it's great against, for example, again, Lumineth, which was just,
Mm,
everyone's expecting Lumineth and KO to be very popular. And Beast of
mm.
Chaos is a direct counter to those lists, which made Spain, with the famous picture,
Yeah,
take the 80 Unger Raider list, because they
yeah.
knew there's going to be lots of Beast of Chaos, and this list is a great counter against that Beast of Chaos. So that's what I meant
I know
with
this
not being
story. I
single
want you to share this story. Okay, like this is too good
Sure.
not to share. So
Yeah.
for the audience who maybe wasn't as dialed in, I saw this. This is one of the things I caught on social media when I was watching over that weekend, and I laughed so hard, especially when somebody did the meme of like corporate wants you to find the
Yeah.
difference
Yeah.
between these two
Uh-huh.
pictures, and it was the old 40K one where he had deployed his whole army like an inch off the
Yeah.
back line, and there was no place to come in. They're the same picture. Okay, so
Exactly.
tell this story.
Yeah, so it was actually happening next to the TO table, and it was unfortunately a Dutch player playing the less fortunate Beast of Chaos list, so to speak. Let me first start off with he didn't have a choice. So people are saying how could he do that? Well, he was paired into his direct counter list, and he had two choices: either deploy his army and shut off by 80 or 90 Unger Raiders turn 1 and 2, or not deploy his army and try to find an angle to go in. They were also playing twists and turns, which didn't help.
Mm,
So one of the reps, I'm not sure who, but pointed out to me that, hey, you should check that table out because someone is trying to recreate the old 40K meme, and I think
Right.
it's working. So I walked over, and I'm actually the one who made the picture where you can see
mm.
like the Spanish guy, like all smug,
Yeah. Uh,
sitting in his chair. And I sent it to Rob, and I think he sent it to John Scrivo, and he made the meme. And
mm,
then I looked on my phone 10 minutes later, and it exploded with like Twitter. It was
yeah.
everywhere. But what happened was both players decided to null deploy, so not deploy any unit on the board,
Right.
which Beast of Chaos can do. And the Unger Raider player had fewer drops, so that's why the Dutch player really had no choice. He could either deploy and
Gotcha.
get shot off, or put everything in the sky.
Mm,
So, or he did, or in ambush. So he did. The Spanish player started to like put down the units around the edge, and then the mini game started of how far can I pull your units or d6 more to wound them to create a gap in 2 turns to maybe fit some units in. And I think he managed to fit in 2 units of Bulgors and a hero. But it's turn 2. It was twist and turns, so the objectives were in the middle of the board, and he was here, so he had to outrun
Right.
2 times to even
mm.
get on an objective. So the game was over. He shouldn't have been paired into there, unless it maybe gave them a great matchup somewhere else. But yeah, it was a great meme.
Mm.
Amazing. Just
That's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah, like that. I saw that. I was like, that's just incredible. And it's funny too because I always wondered if that kind of thing was going to happen with Beast because of the null deployed potential and all of that. It's always the risk we talk about, and there it was in full effect. I love that there is some counterplay to it that he didn't just have to like literally sort of scoop right there, as it were, right? That he tried. Like that's a testament to skill right there of going, okay, like I can still do some unit pulls, I can do some mortal wounds, I can do stuff like that to
Yeah,
try to get a space. So kudos to that player for sticking it out. There's a lot of people who would look at that and just be like, okay, good game, right? Like that's
yeah,
it.
for
So
sure. But you can do that at teams,
right,
because if you were able to turn a 20-0 into a 17-3, that's 3 points your team really needs. They're going to be mad at you if you give up. So, but what was funny is that you'd see people having caught it on Twitter and then walking over to the table and then like peeping in to see what the board state was at that point. So yeah, it was funny. Shout out to Ivar, the Dutch player, for going through that and being an internet meme now.
absolutely, that's great. Okay, so then my final question for this one was, and this is really what I would like. Where do you see as like teams were successful with the list building stage? Like what set apart a successful team? Like this was a good crop of lists. They read the meta correctly. They read, potential strong and weak matchups and played because I feel like the teams format and the way these pairings are done sort of amplifies or has the potential to amplify the rock paper scissors nature of AOS in general,
Mhm.
right? I think general AOS and the way tournaments go, especially in a singles, is it's a soft RPS. I think this has the potential to sharpen that up a little bit. So where do you see what teams were very successful? What did they do, right, at sort of opening up their options, their outs, and so on?
Yeah. Well, first up, I go back to the preparation. Last year we were in Prague, and for a lot of teams, it was their first Worlds. And what you could see is, for example, the English team, they have Tom Maudsley. That was their coach. It was their coach again this year. And Tom Maudsley is maybe one of the best pairers in AOS. Like
Mhm.
he's a fantastic coach, and teams would show up to the table. They had 8 good lists. They would sit down for the pairing, and then after the pairing, they would be like, "What just happened?" Because all our matchups are bad, or they thought a matchup was good, but it was on a certain battle plan. And
Mhm.
for example, this year we had a couple guys who were like, "Oh, I'm going to play Gits. It's a good matchup for me." And then they found out they were playing Presence of Idols, so all the Battle Shock rolls get halved.
Mhm.
And then it turned out not to
Tom,
be a good matchup.
yeah, I may have missed. Who was deciding the battle plan? Like, so you explained the attacker defender, right? But like, was
Yes.
it who was making the choice of which like army was playing on which battle plan? Like that initial choice.
Right.
I
So
may
what
I
I
may have
did,
missed that.
yeah, yeah. So in the rules pack, it was stated that so you have 8 tables to play on as a team, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Because you're eight versus 8, and the first 2 missions were table 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and you would also pair in that order. So a round will have 4 missions. So let's say round mission A will always be the first 2 defenders put down for both
Okay.
teams.
Gotcha.
Then mission B, C, and D. So the order in which you put down your defenders would influence what battle plan they were playing. And of course, you were going to put down 2 attackers on a certain battle plan against the defender.
Okay.
I
Cool.
hope it makes sense.
It
Yeah,
does.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant yeah.
No,
It's
that's
hard to
good.
explain. Normally we have a pairing mat, and then when you visualize that, it's like now I
Right.
see it. It's hard to explain.
Yeah,
No, that's fine. It
sorry.
it's interesting because that's such a good like sneaky point of the having the battle shocks, right? This thing that you knew was going to be
Mm.
strong, this thing you were going to rely on, gets pulled out from under you because you didn't see that. Do you think there are certain like list components or elements? Because you also have the terrain. You mentioned the more open terrain board and the closed terrain board,
Yeah.
right? That kind of thing. So, but do you think there are elements of lists that are sort of prima facie become more interesting in this format than they are in singles? Like there's a certain type of unit or role or something like that that becomes more interesting in this kind of a format.
Let me think. Well, I already touched a little bit on the Stormfiend list. I think the Ravagers list is a good example because it's very good at the attrition game,
Mm-hmm.
um, but it will
Like,
get
do
blown
you
up.
think that let me dig on that one a little bit because you just hit a
Hmm.
point that I think might be interesting. So obviously AOS is largely constructed as a trading game, right? Like that's often
Yes.
what you're trying to do is
Hmm.
create favorable
Movement and
trades.
trading. Yeah.
Yep, movement and trading. That's right. Because the movement sets up you making the trades you want to make, and also get you toward objectives and yada yada yada. Right. Okay. So obviously those two things are largely what's going on here. So not all like one of the often complaints I think that people like Tyler have felt recently is that attrition armies have been suffering in sort of the singles format of recent, right? They haven't. You look at somebody like Nurgle and their sort of downward slide. It's a very attrition focused army, right? And so in trying to play for the win, they often end up being in a place where suddenly they just can't actually attrition people anymore, right? It just they're getting hit too hard in too many places and just getting attrited faster than they can withstand, right?
With some exceptions, obviously, like Soul
Sure.
Blight is an attrition army. There are some exceptions, but yeah.
Well, no, that's exactly what I was going to say, right?
Oh yeah.
So do certain types of attrition armies, right? Since sometimes you're playing into the I want to scrape points out of a loss, like do teams ever make lists that's like, okay, this is our quote unquote bad pairing list,
Uh, hmm.
right? Like here's the list that is this sort of attrition focused list that's solely designed to
Yes.
probably still often lose, but it will scrape more points than it should that it should have the right to. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So that kind of thing.
they definitely do that. Yeah, I call them good defenders, basically, because you can put them down and they will never get a 20-0 win, but they will also never get a 20-0 loss. I think a good example is 60 Blood Warriors.
Yeah.
Is a great example because they're just gonna
Yeah.
sit there and say, come and get me. The
Um,
French last year and also the English this year and the Australians had 200 zombie lists,
mhm.
which just swarm the objective so much that you're not going to be able to get ahead on primary points easily. So you might have a great matchup and win, but it's going to be very close. So they definitely do that. I mean,
Oh, that reminds
how
me.
many 200 zombie lists have you seen in singles the last 6 months? I
Right.
haven't seen almost any, but there were 2 or 3 at Worlds.
Hmm.
And I even
With the
have
old book, were you guys
yeah,
using new books,
yes,
OBR,
old
SPG, old books?
OBR. Well, there wasn't any OBR, but old Soul Blight and old Seraphon as well. Gavin
Okay.
Grigger brought was the underplay bringing Seraphon,
Yeah.
which of course is surprising. But he was 30-0 with the book at that point in the past 6 months. So like,
Right.
sure, like then he can bring him because
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me, like, my first exposure to teams as a format was sort of many, many years ago, way back in the day, discussing it with people. And as a Skaven player for 25 years, I was always fascinated by the two towers lists that would appear in teams lists back in the day, right? So this used to be a list that was like the bell, which made everybody around it immune to battle shock, and then the furnace, which made everybody around it immune to battle shock, and just hordes of like Skaven slaves effectively. So this is again Warhammer Fantasy, right? And the point was it was just impossible to attrit the list, right? Because they would
Mm,
just push forward and just be impossible to kill out. Like they would just they'd never win a game. Like actually winning a game was nearly impossible. And it feels very much like what you're referencing there with the Blood Warriors pile, right? And so
yes,
like a list design that to me is really interesting because it's the kind of thing in singles you'd be like, well, I'm trying to win. That's it. That's the
mhm.
only goal, right? I need to win. Whereas in this, trying to lose less actually
Yeah.
can become a big winning strategy because you're just going to know, like you will have some bad matchups in the round. It's like it will happen. So why not have a list that preps for that? It's your doomsday prepper list, right? That over there. Yeah.
yeah. It's not an easy role to play though. If you know you're that player, you know you're going to play 6 very hard games of Warhammer.
Mm.
So it's tough. It's tough to be that role in the team.
It's what, Tom, I mean, it's kind of weird to admit it, a little embarrassed to admit. Like, this was the thing I didn't get initially about the team's format. The entire point, I get, uh, within a singles context, I get a little frustrated at times when I feel like we have too much of a pronounced rock, paper, scissors within a singles context, because that feels unhealthy to me in some ways. That's a whole other discussion, but that's part of the point of teams is to have these skewed matchups. So, like, you're trying to get as much skew as
Yes,
possible, right?
you're aiming for it.
Maximize winning, minimize, yeah. And and I was also thinking about it, like I usually when I'm taking a list to a GT, I've talked to Vince and Tom about this before. I like to take lists that are designed to go 5 rounds, 4 or 5 rounds, because I think that gives a more interesting experience for me and my opponents. It's more challenging. It's a very Johnny thing to do. But yeah, those lists may not like attrition, like Stormcast list that's like 5 rounds oriented, a Nurgle list that's 5 rounds oriented. I'm scraping by wins or I'm having narrow losses most of the time. And but yeah, that's not exactly great for a team format. Anyway, it was just reflecting on some of the misunderstandings I had about teams initially.
Yeah, no, it is a completely different game. In my opinion, I think Teams Warhammer is fantastic. I really love it. Also, it's not just EU playing it; like, it's big in Australia as well.
Sure.
Mm,
I think it's mostly the Americans and Canadians who don't play it that much. It looks
mm,
like. But yeah, I just love the format. It's so different. It's much more tactical, and I like singles as well. But teams just bring a different dynamic, and it's just
mm,
a lot of fun because apart from Worlds, if you go to let's say you go to I have a 5-person team event in September hosting one, and we're gonna have a couple teams who just brought there's five mates showing
mm.
up. Having the best time playing
Yeah,
side by side, 5
yeah,
tables in a row, and just gonna have a great time. So
absolutely.
yeah, it's just a great experience for both competitive play, but in my opinion, also if you just show up to have a great weekend.
Totally.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not. It shouldn't be understated here that a huge advantage to this format is the team. And I mean, I know this is going to sound like the most obvious
Mhm.
stupid point, but I mean, we haven't really drilled in on it at all, and it's worth mentioning. When you go to a singles tournament, you often go with friends, right? Like it's often you and a couple buddies. You roll to the thing together. But like you only really see them in between rounds, and maybe you catch up, maybe you don't. You're often rushing to your next game or to check pairings, you know. Maybe you get together and have some beers that night or something like that, right? And but it's a very singular alone experience. Like you're sitting there at the table alone, and your game is your game, and you're not thinking about anybody else or what else is going on. Whereas with this, you are part of a team. You're all in it together. The you know, the coach is leading the pairing process. You're going through this. You're thinking about your games for your whole team. You're like, I wonder how, you know, I wonder how Steve is doing over in his matchup that he got there. That was going to be a tough one for him. I wonder if he was able to pull it out, right? Like there is a we're all rowing together type of thing that is a very different, just sort of psychological experience to the thing, right?
Mhm.
Yes, hugely. So. You could see a player walk up to their coach and just said, "I had a 12-8 loss," and they would high five and hug each other
Right.
because he won 6 points he shouldn't have won.
Right.
Yeah.
Which it's amazing to see, and yeah, what I say, it's just a different dynamic. And what I like a lot is you can see the camaraderie in the team as well. Like if the
Mhm.
Danish team, they performed well. They are probably the cleanest war gamers I have ever
Mhm.
seen at an event or will ever, are at Worlds in general. And there's also big camaraderie between the guys as well. So it's just great to see.
Is
Nice.
there a Vince knows I'm obsessed with this subject. Is there a short version of why you think they are the best at Clean Warhammer? 'Cause,
Yes, well, they will actually sit down with their opponent before the game, and they
yeah.
will say no takebacks.
Mhm.
If it's okay with you, I would like to use your dice. So we're both using the same dice pool,
Mm.
and they will always try to have, for example, their measuring tape is going to be on the mat when they're
Right.
measuring when they're measuring distances. They will have you double check everything.
Yeah.
It's just extremely clear. The intent is clear. I spoke to Casper, their Beast of Chaos player, who in the weeks leading up to Worlds played an event, and he was playing the Beast of Chaos list there, and
Mhm.
he actually started turn two, did his hero phase thing, forgot to put his army down, went to the shooting phase, and then realized he didn't put his army down. And his opponent said, "Just put it down." And he said, "No, no, I said no takebacks.
Wow.
Congratulations."
Wow.
And that's the game.
Yeah.
So they will keep a certain standard, and they will hold you to that standard, but they will
Mm.
also hold themselves to the standard, and
Yeah.
that makes it just so clean. I think I've only had two issues. I only had to make two rulings we as a team for the Danish team, and both of them were, look, me and my opponent disagree if something's within range. Could you maybe double check for us so
Mm.
none of
Yep.
us, we don't get so if that's the ruling I have to make for a team for six
Right.
rounds of the most competitive Warhammer they will probably ever play, that's amazing.
No, that's really a testament to like to absolutely clean, like high skill, quality, you know, players playing Warhammer in a good way. Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
More Clean Warhammer awards around, GTs. I love that award. Like cleanest. We did one like a few months ago. Gave him a nice Nurgle bar soap for the cleanest Warhammer player. So I'm just a huge fan of recognizing that.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's not always the most fun Warhammer because not allowing takebacks is normal, but for a lot of players, it could make for a bad experience.
Sure.
Sure.
But you're playing at Worlds, so of course
Right.
your players is going to say, "Look, no, I'm not a bad person, but if I'm giving you this take back and it costs me 2 points, my coach is going to be extremely upset with me."
Sure.
So that's just the way it works.
Yeah,
No,
we've
makes
talked a lot
sense.
about it a lot. As long as you have the conversation up, I mean, it's important to have the conversation up front. What kind of game are we playing? And get on the same page about a number of critical things, and you're good to go usually.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I just love the mindset, and like I said, they're all great guys as well, like genuinely great guys. I had a fantastic time with them, and the entire vibe at Worlds was great. Like you'd
Mm.
you'd expect if you put like the 192 most competitive players in the world, or a part of them in one
Mm.
room, you'd have an issue, but there was no issue at all because everyone's on the same page.
Hmm.
Right.
So you don't get the casual kitchen table guy playing against the tryhard,
Sure.
trying to win the tournament guy who's not going to allow a take back, and et cetera, because everyone's on the same page.
Nice. Nice. All right. So I've just got this last slide here. Little as my picture of the U.S. team there on one side, in deep thought. Noah and Sean and such in there.
Is that Spain's team? Who's that other team there?
That's Spain, yes.
Yeah.
Spain? Cool. Awesome.
And I just thought it would be good to sort of close out here. I know we don't want to hold Tom too late, so I prepared this to make sure we were going to stay in time. It's late where Tom is, and it is the middle of the week, so I just wanted to sort of close out here with some thoughts on Worlds in general, like where specifically how you felt. Like overall, I think you felt pretty positive about this year, but what do you see as the future trajectory for this, right? Like what are the things you'd like to see? Expansion, or just in general, kind of what's the arc of this play, not only on Worlds but on team play in general, maybe even like where are you sitting right now?
Exactly. So this year we had the event at my regular tournament venue in Amsterdam. I'm going to try to make a bid for next year, but I also wouldn't mind if we play somewhere else. So what I just hope is that we will be able to put down a base level quality event every year. I think this year was, I don't want to like toot my own horn, so to speak, if that's the correct way to
That's okay.
use it. But
you can toot it a little. I mean, it's a lot of work you put in, man. Come on, toot a little bit.
I had people like Bill Souza walk up to me and say this was the best event they've ever been to, and that's a huge compliment. He's been to LVO, he's been to Adepticon, he's been everywhere, multiple ETCs probably. So that made me feel like
seen that a lot, man. I've seen that a lot around this event over the last few years.
Exactly. I saw a lot of
it. It's really exciting.
And I just want to make sure that we're going to have a certain base level, and we will keep reaching that level wherever we play, whatever country we go, and I hope we can expand. We have Portugal trying to form a team for next year.
Oh, nice.
Malta, for example, dropped off because they have a very small community, and a big part of their community was supposed to graduate this year, so they weren't able to come, and then they lose a couple of their players, which is big for them. And I know Israel is forming a team, and I know I'm forgetting someone. And of course, in 1, 2, 3 years, you don't know what's going to happen with because normally the Russia would have a team, but of course now it's a delicate situation. You don't know how it's going to go, but the goal is to expand. It would be great to reach like let's say 32 teams in 2 or 3 years. Have played at some amazing venues, and for me it's just I also love hosting and organizing this because a lot of people I just get to see only once a year.
Yeah, sure.
Dayton, the Americans, Jeremy, I can only see them once a year, and so it's a way for me to hang out with the guys again, so to speak. So I just want to make sure the vibe stays good, the quality stays high, and we can expand to add new teams to the roster, because I think it's also a great way for people of different cultures to come together and just have a great time.
Fantastic, I love it. Tyler, you going up for 2024? Are you going up for Team US? We putting your name in the hat there? Should we reach out to Sean?
Hundreds and hundreds of people are better qualified. Well, that's I'm gonna be good. I can be very bad right now with some messages that I may have gotten from some players who in America who are ornery, who play teams, and I'll leave it at that. I probably said too much right there, but they can contact Sean Clark and share any grievances that they might have. They may have been past guests on this show. So yeah, anyway.
No, that's fantastic, man. I find it to be such a fun, cool event that, as you mentioned, it the way it draws everyone together. I was pretty sad that I didn't get to watch the coverage all weekend. I love that we had, the stream team there, literally covering the event, both the individual, some of the games, but also what was going on in the broader context of the tournament itself. it is. I mean, in the same way, to me, it's fun when you're watching the Olympics or anything like that. You know, you're rooting for your team,
Mm.
right? Like that.
For
There's
sure.
nothing wrong with that. It's perfectly reasonable, and I'm not gonna lie that even though I'm a million miles away for this, every time I saw that the U.S. did something good, I was like, yeah, way to go, guys. You know, like, cause I mean, I know these guys. Like, I like these guys. They're friends and acquaintances and good people and people I've played in Warhammer before, and it's like, yeah, you show them, you know, okay. Like, again, even though I'm a million miles away from it, although as it turned out, literally I wasn't
You
that many
weren't.
miles away from it. I was, in fact, very close by. Could have hopped in like an Uber that wouldn't have been that expensive and gotten to where you all were. Life is funny sometimes how it works out, I guess. Um,
Just to
Yeah,
show
and
a little
the
American
venue
bias.
was next to an airport as well, so you
yeah,
like
yeah,
literally could have.
exactly, yeah. Just jumped right on, easy.
Yeah.
So just a final question, Tom, to show a bit of American bias. I did see that Team America won Best Sports, which was quite
Yeah.
cool. And I was just curious if you had a perspective on, I mean, it's always hard to know why, but like why they might have won Best. Was there anything that stood out about how they were playing, the spirit they were playing with? I just thought it was really awesome, obviously, that they won that. I'm sure there are
Yes.
a lot of other teams that were equally deserving, but yeah, just curious if you had any perspective on it.
Yeah, of course. Well, Team America did of USA. I have to say Team USA over there. Bill's gonna be mad at
Sure.
me.
Yes.
Um,
Sorry,
they did
Canada. Sorry, but
they they performed well, and if you perform well, it's pretty hard to get sportsmanship votes. Like it's easy to
yeah.
vote on someone you've lost a game to, won a game off. I'm sorry, but if you lost to someone and you still think they were great sports, I
Mm.
think that speaks to their character a lot. And what you could see during the event is two things. One, you
Mm.
would never see Bill Souza without a drink in his hand. A gin and tonic to be precise. And
Yeah,
two, I think after day one, none of the Americans had any of their own shirts left because they swapped them all with everybody in the room. For
that sounds
example,
about
that's
right.
why I'm wearing a Welsh shirt. I see Owen in the chat. Shout out to
Yeah.
Owen. He gave me the Welsh gave me one of their shirts, to thank me for hosting Worlds.
Mm.
And I even had people try to, wanting to swap my ref shirt with them. So I have like shirts from everywhere now. But the
Nice.
Americans were pretty adamant with it, and they also brought extra shirts. So they were like trying to get everyone's
Mm.
shirt, trading dice, etc. So they really came down to they wanted to perform, but they at first, they want to have a great time with everyone, and it just
Yeah.
showed. The fight was great. The entire team is insanely nice.
Mm.
So I think that just gave them the sports votes because everyone
Mm.
just genuinely thought they were fantastic to be around.
Right on. Yeah, yeah. I was just curious. Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty wonderful to hear. And I mean, having played singles Warhammer against many of those people who are on the U.S. team, I can say like I have never had like even the whiff of a bad game against them. Many of
Mm.
those people were some of my favorite games of Warhammer I've ever played, which by the way I'm sure would be true for most people from all these teams. And
Yeah.
that's really worth saying is that these are all not only great players as far as their skill level, but just the professionalism and as you mentioned, like exactly what you described with the Danish team, right? Like
Mm.
these are the kind of players who generally give good game, for lack of a better way to say it, right? Um, and you just walk away going, man, that was the reason I play Age of Sigmar, right there,
Mm.
right? Like that
You,
was it.
I'll give you an anecdote when you're done. By the way,
Yeah, go
just to
for it,
remind you.
please. Go for it.
You're, okay. Well, the best anecdote from the weekend for me, talking about sportsmanship and competitiveness in
Mm.
one situation, is actually during singles, the final round. We had a French player, Miladin, the Beast of Chaos player. He was playing against a Russian Korn player, and it was turn 4 or 5, I believe. They were only 1 point apart, and the winner
Mm.
was going to podium, first, second, or third, and the loser would probably drop down the ladder.
Right.
Mm.
So they were playing with a chess clock, and the Russian player had clocked out, which normally means you cannot perform any more actions. You can only roll
Mm.
saves and wards, and that's it. But the French player, who is a Worlds player and was there to try to win the event, said, "You know what? Just take my time. This has been the best
Mm.
game I've ever played. I want to finish this game,
Mm.
and I don't care that you clocked out or that you maybe use more time. This game is insane. I want to play it
Mm.
out." And he ended up losing, the French player.
Mm.
very, very graciously by 2 points because a Doomball whiffed attacks on some hero, and then he doesn't
Oh, if
matter.
that's not
And
the
then,
classic story for a Doom Bowl right there, yeah.
and at the end of the game, actually, Rob was watching that game, like literally sat next to the table, and Gareth Thomas as well, I believe, and they both said that this was probably the best game of Warhammer they've ever seen, like, play. And then having the French player like add to the situation by saying, you know what, let's throw the clock out because we're gonna finish this game because this is amazing.
Right.
That for me was like that's the epitome of how you want a competitive event to be.
Yeah.
That's I cannot think of a better note to end on. That is absolutely fantastic. That's incredible. I mean, really, because I mean, I'd be hard pressed to make the same decision. You know what I mean? Like many of us would. That's just such an incredible story, an inspirational story, an aspirational story of how we should all be seeking to play this game, right? To play a great game of Warhammer. Even you know, you're still trying to win, you're still playing hard, but you want to play a great game of Warhammer above everything else.
That's the primary goal. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Awesome, Tom. Thank you so much for coming here and educating us, my friend. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, it was fun, man. I love helping out. So if of course people want to know about the teams format, you can always reach out to the AoS Worlds Council or ask me on Twitter if you want to join as a nation, of course, or if you want to join the singles event, which is an open event. You know, feel free to reach out because you know, we'd love to get more people involved. So happy to come on a show like this, for example, that also, you know, tries to educate the community. So thank you for always putting in the time to make this content, Vince and Tyler, of course. And yeah, it was great coming on.
Absolute pleasure to have you. I say this with absolute sincerity that you're welcome back anytime. Maybe next time we'll have you on to actually just like discuss an army that you love, so you don't have to talk alone the whole time. We'll let you. Not that you don't. You're like, obviously you have a deep love of this team format of AoS Worlds, because to do what you did requires true heart, passion, and love for this thing. It's well beyond a part-time gig. So thank you for running that, or for doing everything you did with Worlds, along with everybody else who helped you. I know it's obviously takes a village, of course. And we're all a stronger community for having this incredible thing happen. But you're welcome back anytime. For all of you out there, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting as well. If you weren't familiar with the Teams format, hey, maybe you are now. Maybe you look for a Teams tournament that's around in your area. For example, I know the U.S. Open recently did have a Teams format tournament going on that was pretty well received. So maybe it's finally taking root over here in the soil. You never know. Our soil is pretty acidic to it, but it could happen. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, check out all the links for everything down below. Don't forget the new game launch, Majestic 13 from I and Uncle Adam, if you're interested in that. Don't forget, follow AoS Worlds on Twitter. That'll be linked down there so you can see all the cool photos and everything else from this event and for future Worlds events, as well as link out to all the individual teams. But as always, we appreciate you watching. We'll see you next Wednesday.